Just introduce yourself again so we know where you're from.
Sure. Sean Garren with Environment America. I'm here from DC. I was wondering that first, just wanted to thank the President for his support of renewable energy like wind and solar, and speaking about that in the State of the Union. I wanted to hear, 43% of our electricity comes from natural gas and nuclear right now, thanks mostly to massive subsidies and lax environmental review. What's your plan and what's the President's plan to move forward with more renewable energy like wind and solar, increasing that percentage of real clean energy in our country?
Thank you.
Sure. I'll mention a couple things. I think the first thing that you heard from the President tonight was to set a new national goal that we as a country can work toward, which is by 2035 to have 80% of our electricity produced from clean sources. Now, in some cases, that will mean wind and solar and renewable sources. In other cases, it will mean zero carbon or low carbon sources of energy like nuclear power and like natural gas that is produced in a way that, that does reduce or eliminate the carbon emissions. But I think the important part about setting this goal and about challenging the Congress and the country to reach it is that the President recognizes that in order to create the incentives, the long-term incentives for investors in the United States to invest in things like wind and solar and renewable energy, they need a long-term incentive, and they need clarity that those incentives are going to stay in place over time. When you talk to businesses, one of the things that they often get frustrated about in Washington is that everything is temporary and that they need a longer investment horizon because they need a couple years to plan out the investment and raise the capital and execute on that. So setting a long-term goal and establishing that system that would provide the incentives is hugely important toward unleashing a homegrown renewable energy industry in the United States. The second thing is doing what the government does very well, which is invest in basic research that the private sector is often unwilling to do because for any individual business there isn't the return on it. And so what the President committed to in the State of the Union tonight was a very substantial increase in clean energy research and development. I'll just take a second here to explain one very specific policy because I think it's quite cool, is he said that he wanted to double the number of energy innovation hubs that we have in this country. And this was an idea that Secretary Chu, who is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, had when he came in. And he said the way that physicists and in the academic environment often solve problems is that you bring a bunch of people together who have different views on an issue, and you all work collaboratively on a problem. These hubs are a manifestation of that idea. You get an engineer, a scientist, an innovator, an entrepreneur, a small business owner together, and you give them a goal, something that seems like a real moonshot, to create fuel from the sun and from the water. Now, right now you think, well, we don't have the technology to do that, but you put a bunch of people together and you say, solve that big problem. And what we've seen is, in the short time that we've funded some of these, for a very small investment, we're producing really path-breaking results. And so the President said, let's double the number of hubs that we have running in this country, because at the end of the day, the way that we're going to have a sustainable renewable industry in the United States is by finding real breakthrough technologies that will reduce the cost of producing electricity through these renewable sources to a level that's not only competitive with traditional sources of electricity, but actually can beat it without additional subsidy or support. So I think the investments in basic research are going to be really important going forward. And then the third thing that I would mention is something that, again, the President has been quite focused on, which is We need to invest in having a supply chain that supports the renewable energy industry in the United States. One of the problems that we have encountered is that if you only provide support for the production of a renewable unit of electricity, then you can get a situation where you have foreign firms who come in and who produce every component of that windmill, or every aspect of that solar panel is not produced in the United States, and gets brought into this country, gets assembled, and then they get a credit for that. They get a government subsidy for that, but it's not actually helping to create U.S. jobs, and it's not actually helping to support a broader industry in the United States. So one of the things that the President has really focused on is let's provide support for manufacturers who are making the blades that will go into a windmill. Let's help the people who are going to make the components that will become part of the solar panels in these installations, so that more of that activity is happening in the United States. More of the technology and intellectual property that is developed as part of that stays here in the United States, so that we have a sustainable renewable energy industry in the United States. So, I think those three steps are important steps in the right direction, and I think what you heard from the President tonight was a real sustained commitment to make this a long-term part of our economic future.